You are familiar with what is called the Holiness Code. Am I going to bore people today? Oh, I hope not. Well, we're familiar with the Ten Commandments, right? Oh, but there's a whole lot more. And if you were a young person growing up in ancient Israel, you better memorize all 200 whatever there are of them. And there's a lot of thou shalt nots. And if you had sausage or bacon for breakfast this morning, you're going to be kicked out of the people of Israel. Better watch it. Oh, there are so many thou shalt nots. Full of them. But there's some thou shalts too. There's some good stuff. I'm so glad that Jesus came to fulfill the law. Because have any of you ever gone to like a new job and they have a whole rule book of all the things you're supposed to do or not do? And it's a long, long laundry list. And you're supposed to kind of know it, but you really don't incorporate it in your heart because it just doesn't speak to you.
Isn't that called the collective bargaining?
It's called what?
Isn't that called the collective bargaining agreement?
Oh, collective bargaining agreement. Yes, it is sometimes called that. And it goes on and on and on of all the thou shalts and the thou shalt nots. And you're supposed to abide by this. But sometimes there's so many, you can't remember them all. And you really haven't incorporated them. And this is pretty much what happened to the people of ancient Israel. It's that there are all these laws that they're supposed to obey. And sometimes you didn't get them all in there. And then sometimes you'd say, hey, that doesn't make any sense. So you just kind of forget them. And the people were always constantly, I should say, breaking their covenant, their agreement with God. And so the young prophet Jeremiah says, you know what? This is what's going to happen. God is going to make a new agreement with you, a new covenant. And you're not going to worry about all the rules and regulations that you have to read off. It's going to be right here. You're going to know the right thing to do because God's Spirit will be speaking to you. And you'll know what you should be doing. Isn't that a lot better when it's in there than when it's on a long, long list of things you're supposed to do or not do? I think I shared with you before when I was in college and lived in the dorms, there were 100 rules. And I thought, gee, that would be nice to just break each one by one, which I did. And I don't do that anymore, but I was young and stupid. But it was kind of fun, especially getting a guy into my room. And the poor thing, he thought he had a special invitation. Once I got him in the room, then I sent him right out the back door. Thought, well, broke that one. But anyway, I want you to think of times in your life when you were really stressing, not knowing the right thing to do. But down deep, you really knew what you needed to do, even though maybe you didn't want to. I had a friend who had a daughter that got caught up in drugs. She dropped out of college. She was just kind of living at home. My friend was working 8 hours a day, plus commuting an hour each way. She didn't really have much time to supervise her daughter. And her daughter was just like getting up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She knew the right thing to do. She just didn't have the heart to do it. And then finally, she got confronted by her pastor. Because this just was not working. And so her pastor said, what should you do? And she said, well, what I really should do is I should have a little tough love. And I should have her leave. And if she doesn't want to follow the rules of the house, well then there's the door. And even though she didn't want to do it, she felt guilty. She was afraid her daughter would end up as a prostitute or something even maybe worse. But she did do it. And the amazing thing is that this is what turned her daughter around. Her daughter, because she didn't have any money and she didn't have any place, went to a shelter in Hollywood, of all places. They have some good shelters there for young people. And went to a shelter. It was a church-based shelter. She didn't know that. I mean, who would want to go to a bunch of churchy people when you're doing all kinds of drugs and things like that? But she did. And the people were so kind to her. And they didn't point the finger and say, oh, you should be ashamed of yourself. What they did is they just opened their arms and their doors to her, and they had Bible studies, and they were singing, and they were helping people get jobs, and she finally was able to get some kind of employment, and then from there she went to LA City College and started a program in, I think it was medical billing or something like that, and got a job, and finally got an apartment, and finally came home to Mom, not to live, but to let Mom know that she was doing all right, and that she had changed her life, that she had turned around. Mom knew it was the right thing to do, but look at all those years that had gone by. Like even when she was in high school, where she knew that her daughter was on drugs and hanging around with the wrong kind of people, but she thought if she put her out on the street that things would be a lot worse. And at least she, you know, is under my roof, and there's food on the table, and there's a bed to sleep in. But it took that tough love. It was her pastor that didn't tell her what to do, but just knew that she knew the right thing to do, and kind of pushed a little bit, and she did. The other thing I wanted to talk about is what I call social values. The law of Moses is full of things to do with other people. And we were discussing this in Bible and Bagels this morning, and it seems like some people don't have a sense of social values about other people that are not in their own family. And they can just pass by somebody who's down on their luck, homeless, hungry, might be raining, and you know, well, gee, that's too bad. And how do we get a sense of what God wants us to do with people who are really down and out? And what came to mind to me was a man by the name of Warren Buffett. Anybody ever hear of Warren Buffett? Yes. Does he have very much money?
No.
Oh, yes. He's one of the richest men in the world. I mean, this is a multi-billionaire. And he grew up as a child pretty much in isolation. His family was very, very into, we'll make as much money as we can, we'll keep it to ourselves, and he earned it, so nobody else needs to have anything to do with it. And so that was the way he grew up. Those were his family values. Money for us, and forget the rest of the world. There is a God, by the way. Anybody know that? There's this awesome God, and there's this great Spirit. And the Spirit came down upon Warren when he was a young man, and he met a young woman who you might say had the opposite values of his family values. Her name was Mary, and she had a totally different view of reality. She had a sense that everybody should care about everybody else. That we're all in this human family together. And that when one falls down, we will just pick them up and cradle them and nurture them and try to bring them to wholeness. Now this is a very, very foreign value to Warren Buffett and his family. This is not the way he was brought up. But this is actually the kind of message you get in a lot of these laws that you find, particularly in Leviticus, all these social laws. For example, we did this in Bible and Bagels this morning. In the social law that you find in Leviticus, if you are a farmer and you're having people pick the grain, and they're kind of like in a straight line and they're just picking like this, you only do it one time. And the reason for that is you don't go back over it the second time. Because there are some very poor people who really can't afford to buy your grain. There's no way they could afford it. and you don't want anybody to starve. So the